When we talk about financing, a lot of people mean different things. There is a chance, more often than not, that a person or a person within an organization would know people who know about financing. They would know a banker. They would have a bank. They would have a house bank. They would know someone who could help them with financing. The truth of the matter is, like, there are financing structures that work, financing models that work, but for different purposes. I want to make a real distinction here between how does conventional financing work. And when you talk about conventional financing, you finance your house, your mortgage, your car, your computer system. And when we talk about not so conventional financing, is how you make financing work to make your buildings efficient. And again, I want to make a second distinction as well, as is between financing, again, conventional financing, and also financing that could really scale, for that matter. Is it a model that you have implemented once and you will never implement anymore, or is it a model that you could scale and roll out in different territories, different countries, different continents if you have to? So with that, I just want to turn your attention to a financing structure that we have used that has worked. We have implemented it in both EU countries and non-EU countries as well. It has worked for both public buildings and for private customers as well, buildings of private customers, commercial and industrial private customers. And it will, as Mr. Missiga from Environment was mentioning, a financing structure to work, it has to meet the needs or address the needs of different stakeholders. Internal stakeholders, from the perspective of the supplier, of the ESCO, what they call the energy services company there, and also external stakeholders from their perspective, that would be the end customer, and for that matter, the finance provider, financial institution, or set of investors that are going to be involved. So all these different stakeholders' purposes have to be met in order for a financing structure to work. And in that first model, the sale of receivables or forfeiting model, again, this is a structure that we have implemented in real life, real customers, government entities, and industrial, private customers as well, and in different countries, different territories, both EU and non-EU. In that we have, as I mentioned, we have the ESCO, be it Johnson Controls, Siemens, Honeywell, Schneider. We have the customer, end user, who will be the recipient of the final benefits, in that case expressed in terms of energy conservation measures or consumption savings that you would get. And these are very, very monetizable units. In other words, you can put value to them. In our case, it would be a quantity unit of kilowatt hours saved. You can put a value to these. So that's the end user getting the benefits. And then on the right hand side, we have the finance provider, and that could be a financial institution, can be a bank, it can be a non-financial institution, a set of investors, and I'll speak later on how you could also accommodate different investor interests within other entities and structures, such as, for example, a special purpose vehicle. But in that simple example, we have the three players. We have the ESCO, the customer, and the finance provider, whereby the ESCO would enter into an asset purchase and maintenance contract agreement for a number of years. What we have seen and executed on would be anything that starts from 5, 7, 10, 15 years. We have also tried structure that would work for more than that. But having said that, in a typical lease or forfeiting model, if you talk to a bank, usually their comfort zone would be between 5 to 7 years. By exception, they could do 8. 10 would be really a stretch. When you talk about 12 or 15 years, that's basically verging on the art of the impossible there. We have secondly, a second stream, we have the relationship between the ESCO and the finance provider, where the ESCO would enter into this, what we call the sale of receivables or forfeiting model with the finance provider. And against that, the ESCO has upfront funding from the finance provider. It is very important from an ESCO perspective that they get funding during the construction period, because we sometimes are talking about construction periods that would last for months. It could be 3, 5, 6, up to 12 months, and even longer. An ESCO, a provider, a supplier cannot afford to be out of pocket for that longer period of time. And also for many ESCOs that are reporting under international accounting standards or US GAAP for that matter, they would have to have a true sale during that construction period, which means basically they would have to take their revenue and margin during the construction period that would last up to a year. And the reason for that is that more often than not, they would not be able to afford to take revenue over a 10 or 15-year period. That would simply not fly. So again, second point is we have the finance provider and ESCO with a financing contract, and then against that, the financing provider finances by way of upfront funding the ESCO. Thirdly, we have the stream of payments that are going to be assigned by the customer to the finance provider. And here we are talking about a stream of payments. If it's a 10-year contract, if it's monthly payments, we're talking about 12 times 10, 120 payments, monthly payments, that's a stream of these 120 monthly payments that are going to be assigned from the customer to the finance provider, which doesn't have to be that way always. It can sometimes also pass through the ESCO. If, for example, a customer says, I don't want to have to do anything with a financial institution, I want to work directly on with you, I want to see only one invoice. So that stream of payments can be also either assigned directly to the finance provider or pass through the ESCO in this particular case. Number 4, we have the customer pays maintenance fees to the ESCO directly. Again, usually maintenance or service fees would fall out of the scope of financing. The reason being that usually financing for investment project would happen upfront. So revenue and margin, remember, could be taken upfront by the ESCO company. Maintenance happens over a period of time. There is no sense to finance or for a customer to pay interest on something that will go on for a period of time, and they will not have seen the benefits until that period of time has passed. So in terms of assets, the title will be held by the customer and will be subject to certain liens there. Accounting treatment, it will be on balance sheet for a customer. And now when I speak about the second structure, you will see that most of the currently ongoing financing structures that are being accounted for as off balance sheet would potentially fall on customer balance sheets with the forthcoming accounting that's supposed to converge between the US and the international accounting standards. It can be applicable to bundled retrofits. In that financing structure, you would basically assign these receivables would include receivables that would apply to, I mentioned, to the hardware, if there is any software portion, any project management, and any other soft costs that will be involved in that trade, except for the maintenance and service portion. So that's again a structure that we have used and implemented in a number of regions and territories and different legislations as well. Second, and I promise that's going to be last, and again this is a structure that has worked. This is a structure that we have designed in order to preempt the forthcoming legislation or accounting legislation that would render most of the off-balance sheet structures to be on-balance sheet from a customer perspective. We are trying to preempt that by putting in place a structure that we call an energy services agreement, where basically you have created a special purpose vehicle, an OCO, for the purpose of our discussion. You still have the ESCO, Johnson Controls, Siemens, Schneider, Honeywell, and we have the customer, and we have the investors. So set of investors there. It could be either equity or debt investors, or it could be both. It could be people. It could be only equity or only debt, or it could be both. A mix of both instruments. What we have here is again the special purpose vehicle or the ELCO that sits between the end customer and the ESCO. it is signing a contract with the ESCO, which basically assigns all the guaranteed savings that you would have in a normal energy performance contract. In a back-to-back fashion, the OCO in turn would sign an energy service agreement with the final customer. Basically, it would reflect most of the terms and conditions of a normal contract, any contract that's, say, take an energy performance contract, for example. The OCO will take on a back-to-back or underwrite in a back-to-back fashion all these terms and conditions to the final customer. So again, there are going to be investors who would fund the SPV, the special purpose vehicle, or the OCO. The ESCO would sell to the OCO the assets, in this case. In that case, again, the ESCO would enter into asset purchase and maintenance agreement with the OCO, everything as in a normal contractual setting, but this time not directly with the end customer, but with the OCO. Number 3, we have, again, the energy service agreement that's almost simultaneously is going to be signed between simultaneously to the asset purchase agreement that has been signed between the ESCO and the OCO. Simultaneously, the OCO will sign the energy service agreement with the end customer. Number 4, the OCO provides return to the investors, and depends on the mix between equity and debt investors. There will be different expected rates of return. Equity investors usually require more return because of the higher risk that they take versus debt investors. And number 5, we have the OCO would get usually the benefit of tax and environmental attributes as a result of this structure. What's the benefit of this structure? The major benefit of this structure is that you would have the end user account for it as a off their balance sheet. In other words, they would take the payment out of their operational budget. It has a particularly big impact on public authorities, on local authorities as well, who would be subject to accounting for debt in their balance sheet, especially if they have to meet certain budget deficit or public debt requirements as part of, for example, stability mechanism. I mean, there are different objectives, different incentives for people to take, or public entities to take less debt on their balance sheet. That would be a structure, again, that would work more often than not. Again, subject to, again, local public accounting rules, again. But more often than not, that would be something that could be tweaked in a way to meet their off-balance sheet accounting treatment. Again, it would not count as for their budget deficit purposes or public debt purposes. Again, it very much depends on how the contract is written, but again, this is a structure that we have tested, and it has worked. It has worked in a couple of legislation for an off-balance sheet treatment. And what is interesting about it is that it really preempts the forthcoming on-balance sheet treatment for most of the off-balance sheet instruments for both public and private customers. Again, in terms of the assets, the title will be held by the OCO. Just please keep in mind that the OCO in this case is the end customer from the ESCO's perspective. And what would happen at the end of the term, and again, we're talking about long terms here, at the end of the 15-year term, for example, what would happen is that the customer at the end of the day would have options at the end, what they would do with the existing financing structure. Would they want to continue to pay for it with a very nominal value over another 2, 3, 5 years in time? Would they want to, and that's what we mean by the renew, would they want to purchase the equipment, take title and purchase the project? In that case, they would purchase it at a fair, what we call a fair market value then, at the end of the 15-year term? Or would they want to return to the ESCO, to the supplier in this case? So they have the options. That's the another beauty of this attribute of this structure, is that the end user at the end of the day has the options at the end of term. So in addition to them accounting favorably off balance sheet for this structure, the end user through the OCO company have the options at the end of term to either renew, return, or purchase at a fair market value at the end of the term. With that, I would open it up for questions, if you have any.
Thank you very much, Alex, for a very interesting presentation. My name is Oliver Rapf. I'm from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. What's the average energy saving you have achieved with that second model, with that longer-term model? And what was the return of investment for the investors?
Well, again, interesting questions. If I can take the second part of your questions first. Again, it would really depend on the mix of investors that we have put in the special purpose vehicle. Again, the equity type investors would expect a higher rate of return due to the higher risk that they're taking. So equity capital, equity finance is riskier than debt finance. One reason being that equity finance is not tax deductible. There are other risks as well. So the higher risk should be compensated by more return as expected by the equity holders. We would be expecting it to be in the double-digit realm already in terms of expected. We're talking low double digits, but could be anything between 10, 12 to 16, 17% there that they'll be expecting. Debt investors, that would be usual debt rates that we are looking at, and depends on the many factors. For example, the quality of the credits, legislation, where it is, different levels of risk that have to be evaluated. We would be looking into, depending again on the legislation and the counterparty risk at the end of the day for debt holders, it would be anything between 5 and 10%. And the reason it might be slightly higher than the prevalent mortgage rates, for example, for financing, is that here we're talking about a bigger risk projects, longer lead times, lots of risk surrounding the construction periods. But again, average for debt holders would be between 5 and 10%. Whereas for equity, again, it will be in the double digits. So if you have both sorts of investors in a mix, it will be a mix or bundled rates that they'll be expecting overall from a project cost perspective. Energy savings, again, I think it was one of the also of the quiz questions there as well. We will be looking into, for example, we have worked with the EUSEW fund, the European Energy Efficiency Fund, for example. One of the basic requirements for a project, for a public project to qualify for financing there is that primary energy savings should be at least 20% there on an annual basis from the baseline. So if that would be an indication or a guideline as to where the starting point is, hope that answers your question.
Christian Hauke from DG Enterprise from Sustainable Construction Unit. I have two questions actually. The first one would be if you could give us the name of this pilot, so some countries where you have been doing this exercise. And the second one would be in relation to the scheme, what is the default risk, and if there is some insurance schemes that you are working with?
Okay, thank you. I'll tackle the first question first. Countries, pilots. We have Germany, a couple of projects, and we have just completed one project with the government of Monaco as well, pilot countries. In terms of default risk, again, I might need a clarification on the question, what is it exactly? It would, if you're talking about the counterparty risk or the end credit risk there, again, it would very much depend on, is it a national authority, is it a public entity? In that case, that could be more or less checked. If it's, it would make a difference, for example, if it's in, I don't know, in Germany versus, for example, you mentioned it. If it's on a private customer level, again, there's lots of factors that have to be considered. Payment history, rating, if it's a rated company, all these sorts of things. In terms of insurance, no, we haven't used insurance as all. The biggest sort of insurance in an energy performance contracting would be the solidity of the guaranteed savings. And here we're talking about very monetizable units, kilowatt hours of saving, monetizable. We very much stand behind these savings. We actually guarantee them, or sometimes they could even not guarantee them if people know that companies, ESCOs, have a track record of achieving them.
Yeah, Jonna Byskata, UTC again. I am interested in this second model because normally I understood the ESCO services that the energy savings pay for the actual efficiency measures. So in the second one, at the end of the period, there's the question of the assets. So the actual customer hasn't in that case really bought the asset, but they then have to reconsider it after. I mean, in a way, when you do something to buildings, can you really sort of remove the asset? How do you, what's the sort of model there? I mean, the interest for the customers would, I presume, be to keep it anyway, but that's not calculated from the start.
That's a very good question, indeed. Yes, it would be. It would relate to the assets. Some of it could be embedded stuff, and especially in public sensitive buildings, where like removal would not be not only feasible but not also socially responsible. Take a hospital, for example. But again, at the end of the term, and here we're talking really long terms. Usually, the assets will have been fully paid out. In other words, when I talked about the options at the end of term, I mentioned that they could continue to pay for that, but that would be a very nominal rental that they'll be paying the end customer in that case. Really nominal, just because you can't put the value at zero there for obvious reasons. It would be a very nominal rental that what we call a peppercorn rental that they would continue to do, but essentially they will have the asset. Obviously, the other option would be to purchase it at a fair market value. Then what would be a fair market value of a, I don't know, of a chiller or a boiler after 15 years at the end of the day? And by that structure, it would more or less have been fully paid out. The only reason is that we do not say that it's being fully paid out is that the auditors or the accountants would like to put it on balance sheet during the term of the contract.
Sarah Kunkel from BPIE, Building Performance Institute. One very important factor about the success of such a project is the timing and the question, when do you access a project? And the question is, how do you know about your potential clients? Is it more the clients that come to you, or how do you identify projects?
Thank you for that question. Again, it would depend on the profile of customers, of clients. If it's a public customer, more often than not, it would have to be publicly procured or publicly tendered. So public tenders are known well in advance, and you just have to basically pick your battles where to participate, having a fair chance to succeed versus not. And if it's a private customer, it's again as any private initiative or private contracting takes place. It's about contacts. It's about forums like these. I mean, it is like networking and both on a personal and on a company level. But again, that's on the private side. On the public side, it would be more or less regulated as to how it goes. For example, if you pick a country, again, I keep picking Germany, but if you have Germany, for example, you would have a list of the ongoing and future public tenders that will take place in the next year or so. So you could more or less know where to go to.
Given that it's possible and profitable, what's stopping more of this being done? What are the barriers putting those models in place?
That's another session of its own, I guess, if I start talking about barriers. But one of the biggest barriers, if I can put in one sentence, is in one word, actually, is simplicity. I mean, we seem to have the legislation that's already taking good shape to support this. We have the people who need the energy savings, on the other hand. And speaking about stakeholders, we have the capital, finance is available, structures available as well. What prevents it from happening is simplicity. Simplicity of contracts, uniformity of contracts across countries, simplicity of, again, financing structures as well, how simple it is for the different stakeholders, both internal and external, to buy into that. And also simplicity of rolling it out from one country to another. I would guess that would be one of the main barriers, simplicity and uniformity, that's really not currently really being cracked. That's preventing really the full success and rollout of this. But the need is actually really there. The need is really there.
Yes, sir. How do you assign the depreciation value, so the duration of the goods you invest in, and so the depreciation scheme?
We wouldn't set them. Again, it would be according to national legislation or national accounting standards. Again, it would depend on how, what kind of entity or the entity, the end user, from an end user perspective, what standards they are reporting under. But really, if once you know what kind of standards they're under, are they under IFRS, are they under US GAAP, for example, local GAAP, what is it? You would usually have like a normally prescribed depreciation rates of different sets or classes of assets. Some assets, I mean, and especially in the off-balance sheet structure, or if auditors or accountants are assessing whether it will be, for example, an operating lease, at the end of the day, some assets would be immediately what we call immediately written off, immediate what we call consumables, not necessarily fixtures, but that would be really expensed right up front. There would be others that would be longer term in nature, assets that would have prescribed depreciation rates for intangibles, amortization rates. They'll be usually prescribed by the guiding accounting standard. Thank you. Thank you all.